we're going to require each of the organisations that do verifications to actually keep records themselves. Our system is going to be very, very large in regard to the volume of hits on the site, as well as the memory that's required. So as a result, there won't be a chronological memory for you at your front end when you log in. So if I verify 2 volunteers in June, and I then come back in August to verify another 2 volunteers, it won't list my previous 2 verifications I did 2 months prior. So when you do your verification process on the system, you can print that table. I recently found out there's a button on your computer called print screen. Most people knew that, but I didn't. That takes a photo of what's on the screen and you can place it somewhere else. So that can be your record keeping technique. You can copy and paste to an Excel database. You can even write it on the back of a magazine, as long as you can provide evidence that you have kept appropriate records for your verifications of your staff and your volunteers. We need you to keep their name, their number, the expiry date that comes up when you get your results, and the date that you're on the system, so the date of verification. We will have compliance and audit programs where we will systematically go to sectors and industries and say, your website reflects that you currently run 6 lessons to teach children how to play the violin. And of those 6 lessons, 3 of them are running at the same time, so therefore you must have at least 3 people teaching. We need to see evidence of the 3 people who are going to be engaging in those roles. It won't be sufficient for you to say, yes, I've done it, look it up on your system. We will need to see evidence that you keep records, simply because A, it's your obligation under Act, and B, we want you to plan for succession. We want you to identify that if someone steps into your role a year from now or 2 years from now, we want them to know that they have to verify under the law. And the best way for them to know that is for you to have a system in place, a checklist, some sort of ability to record those outcomes, so that if I step into that role in a short-term basis because you go overseas for a couple of weeks, or I take on a new role because you left, I know that a working with children check applies for those particular types of roles. As I said, we're quite flexible with the way in which you keep them. They don't have to be electronically kept, they can be kept in paper. You might print out a table that you write the information in. It's entirely up to you, whatever works best for you, but we do need to see those records when we do compliance and audit programs. If someone becomes barred through that continuous monitoring, so you engage someone via their number, they've been issued with a clearance at the point that you verify their number via the website, and then 3 months later or a year later, they commit a serious sexual violence offence and we deem that too great a risk to work with kids, we will contact you after we've contacted that person. So we'll contact you, and as I said earlier, we will ask a few questions. We'll try and identify whether they're engaged in a child-related role. If you disclose to us they are, by law you must get them to stand down. Now, being that the majority of roles that we're talking about today are volunteering, we don't have to be too concerned with things like unfair dismissal, but people sometimes will say that's slander, that's defamation, that's discrimination. You're protected under our legislation from liability in regard to compensation, as long as it's a child-related position. If you are compelling your gardener to go and get a working with children check, and then you tell them to leave the role because we've notified you that through continuous monitoring they pose a risk, you won't have those sorts of protections. So there are things that are written into our legislation and regulation that give you the ability to dismiss, withdraw, suspend people from roles, as long as you can identify part of that job is child-related. So they work directly face-to-face with children. In the new system, we do have a 5-year strategic phasing plan. It will be strategically rolled out year by year. So some sectors and industries will be rolled out in the first 12 months, then the second, third, fourth and fifth. Volunteering has been spread out across those 5 years, and we've got a vast sort of diversity of organisations represented today. Once the phasing schedule is released with the regulation, we'll have a tool online where you can look up what your sector and industry is and when it applies. Until then, it's business as usual till we transition to the new system. Once we transition to the new system, for the volunteering roles in various sectors, if it's not your phasing period, so you're not in year 1 or year 2, we will have a statutory declaration that is similar to the volunteer student declaration that's in place now, that you can apply to those volunteering roles. Once you're required to be phased in for your sector and industry, not only do all of your new volunteers must go and get the new number, but all of your existing volunteers working with children must also go and get a new number. You may have someone who's volunteered for you for 40 years, and at the end of that date for your phasing, you're going to be legally obligated to ensure that you've transitioned all of those volunteers to go and get a new number, and you have evidence that you verify them. So essentially within 5 years, all paid, self-employed and volunteer roles in New South Wales will be in the new system, but there is a 5-year plan. We're going to review and do another round of consultation, the entire system, the new Working with Children Check, after 2 years. There aren't many systems that I've seen in government where after operations commence, they'll actually give the community and stakeholders and industries and sectors the ability to provide feedback and possibly modify the system to make it more applicable and easy to operate for sectors and industries. We want community and sector buy-in at that 2-year point, so we'll have a range of tools available online and via media to say we are now reviewing the work maturity check in New South Wales. It's a review report type process. How does it work for you? Are there any gaps? Are there any issues? Is there any feedback you can provide to us? We had lots of feedback from volunteering peaks and organisations in the consultation period when it was being designed. There will be another round of that sort of process after 2 years. I spoke about it before and I'll finish off on it. It's one form of risk management. Under our legislation, it's your only obligations in regard to the working maturity check is to ensure that they get the new number and it's verified. But we absolutely recommend and we encourage organisations to look at other forms of risk management to layer the way in which you prevent harm to children. Induction training, a lot of volunteer organisations now are providing induction training, and very good induction training. I've seen some induction training tools in volunteering that are better than paid industries and large paid industries. When you have those sorts of processes and applications and techniques and procedures, please do let other volunteering organisations know how easy it is to adopt them and how it might take a little bit longer, but it does increase your risk management around children having the reduced likelihood of being harmed. Our child safe, child friendly mantra is make it hard for people to harm a child. And you make it hard by vetting who they are, both through the working maturity check, but also doing a reference check. Giving them expectations on what their role is, so giving them a position description and also giving them a code of conduct that applies to that role. And even if you have a short-term engagement with a volunteer for a couple of days, it doesn't mean you can't give them a verbal code of conduct and say, thank you for engaging with us today. Here's 4 key things I need you to remember. We don't discipline children. If there's an issue with behaviour management, please liaise with our staff who have a rapport with those kids and can deal with it. Because sometimes, on rare occasions, short-term volunteers won't know that they're not required to discipline children, and they might step in and be physically aggressive towards a child. That reflects very badly on your organisation, but more importantly, it means a child could be harmed. So, induction training, codes of conduct, expectations, complaint handling procedures, having a transparent organisation that says even if you have a short-term volunteer, if they see someone else do the wrong thing to a child, they know how to report it, and they know what reporting processes there are, and they know there's no victimisation, and there's confidentiality and privacy associated with reporting. Your volunteers should know what their obligations are in regard to a range of things like risk management, not just workplace health and safety, which is a really key topic this year with the volunteer sector, but also with things like child protection and where they can go to get information about reporting concerns they might have. Having your volunteers understand that the kids know what's expected of them is another key message as well. If there's a code of conduct for your volunteers, let your children know what applies to adults. Because a lot of parents will drop kids off at programs and say, do as you're told and make sure you follow the rules. If someone tries to target a child for harm, they'll use that as a tool or a weapon to say to kids, you've been told you have to do as I say. Whereas you can turn that around by simply saying, yes, you need to follow the rules, but one of the rules is if you feel scared, threatened or harmed, or you feel uncomfortable about something in the way in which someone's behaving towards you or has done something to you, the rule is you need to raise that with us as well. If your adult volunteers know that is an obligation of the kids, it reduces the likelihood of them taking advantage of those children on site or within your program.